Back in late January, this dramatic footage of an F-35 crashing at Eielson Air Force Base went viral across the internet. In this video, you can see the fifth-generation fighter tumbling out of the sky with its gear down like a falling leaf until it hits the snow-covered ground and explodes. And then you can see the pilot floating to Earth in his parachute. Now the U.S. Air Force has just released the Aircraft Accident Board report that details how and why this crash happened. On the 28th of January 2025, the mishap pilot assigned to the 355th Fighter Squadron manned up his F-35 in a climate-controlled shelter and went through his normal start checks. Once complete, he taxied out of the warm shelter and into the cold, which hovered right around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. He wound up waiting for 40 minutes to take off as the other members of the mission worked through minor issues during startup. At approximately 12:50 p.m. local time, the mishap pilot launched as Dash 3 in a 4-plane training flight, acting as red air against 2 other F-35s. After takeoff, as the aircraft accelerated through 275 knots, the mishap pilot got an overspeed gear caution. According to the F-35 flight manual, that caution appears when aircraft has exceeded or will exceed the landing gear airspeed limit at the current rate of acceleration. The clean aircraft structural limit is 300 knots. The accident report states that overspeed gear cautions are a common occurrence after takeoff in the F-35A, especially in cold weather environments. The mishap pilot raised the nose and reduced the throttle setting so he wouldn't exceed the 300-knot gear limit. At that point, he noticed that his gear indicator showed that his nose gear hadn't fully retracted. The mishap pilot radioed the rest of his flight that he was headed back overhead the airfield to troubleshoot his problem and asked that one of the other F-35s join on him for a visual check. As the 2 aircraft rendezvoused at 9,500 feet overhead the field, the mishap pilot transmitted his situation to the supervisor of flight, or SOF, on the ground, telling him that he'd had slow gear retraction and that the aircraft's nose wheel door was open. The SOF acknowledged the transmission and said he'd back the mishap pilot up with the gear retract fail emergency procedures. As the wingman joined, he reported to the mishap pilot that his nose door looked to be opened by about 2 inches. The mishap pilot confirmed with the SOF that the next step in the pocket checklist was to lower the gear handle. The mishap pilot did that, and initially he got a 3 green indication, which means all 3 landing gear are down and locked. He told the SOF that he was going to hold overhead to burn down to a safe landing weight, and he told his wingman that he was cleared to detach to rejoin the Red Air mission as briefed. However, the wingman then reported that the mishap pilot's nose wheel was cocked about 25 degrees to the left. The mishap pilot rechecked his panel and saw he now had a nose wheel steering degraded indication. The SOF asked the mishap pilot how much gas he had left, and the mishap pilot relayed 14,500 pounds, or about 80% of capacity. The mishap pilot then requested a conference hotel, which is when the SOF picks up a hotline to the engineers at Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the F-35, to discuss any malfunctions that aren't directly addressed in the pocket checklist. While waiting for the conference hotel to come together, the mishap pilot tried maneuvering the jet to see if he could get the nose gear to recenter, but the wingman reported that it didn't move. A few minutes later, the conference hotel had assembled, consisting of 5 Lockheed Martin engineers on the phone with the SOF who would relay their recommendations to the F-35 pilots overhead the field. The engineer's initial belief was that there had to be some sort of mechanical malfunction with the nose wheel because under normal circumstances, it's impossible for the nose wheel to be stuck canted at an angle when the gear is extended. After some discussion about the downside of attempting an arrested landing, particularly the potential for an aircraft rollover after touchdown, consensus of the conference hotel was to do a touch and go with only the main landing gear hitting the runway, not the nose gear. The idea was that this touch and go might cause the weight on wheel switches to recenter the nose wheel. After burning down for another half hour, the mishap pilot did the first touch and go and then climbed back up and rejoined his wingman, who reported that the nose gear was still canted about 20 degrees to the left. In addition to the nose wheel degraded indication, after the first touch and go, the mishap pilot also now had a flight control system fault indication and a weight on wheel switch failure, in addition to multiple main landing gear health reporting codes, or HRCs. The Lockheed Martin engineers didn't acknowledge the faults associated with the main landing gear and continued to focus on those associated with the nose gear. That would come back to bite them later. Although neither the mishap pilot or his wingman noticed it, and the flight control system fault gives no specific indication of what is causing the fault, in addition to the nose wheel being canted, the right main landing gear was not fully extended, which post-mishap analysis determined was the source of the weight on wheels switch failure indication. After some additional consultation, the conference hotel all decided that the mishap pilot should attempt a second touch and go, this time at a higher than normal approach speed and allowing the nose gear to touch the runway in an attempt to center it. Post-mishap analysis showed that the second touch and go actually moved the nose wheel from 20 degrees left to 6 degrees left after it touched the runway. But as the mishap pilot was climbing back to rejoin his wingman for another visual check, the F-35 experienced uncommanded oscillations in both the yaw and pitch axis. The mishap pilot attempted to counter the oscillations with the stick as he selected max afterburner. After a few more attempts to counter the uncommanded movement of the aircraft, the pilot released the stick to see if that might stop it. But that didn't work, so he ejected. After ejection, the mishap aircraft continued to climb, reaching an altitude of 3,200 feet mean sea level before stalling and descending out of control until hitting the ground near the runway. The F-35 was destroyed on impact. The crash debris remained within the airfield boundaries. The mishap pilot's ejection seat and parachute worked as designed, and he was able to walk to the ambulance that got to him shortly after he hit the ground. In the report's statement of opinion, the president of the Accident Investigation Board, Colonel Michael Lewis, wrote the following. After initial takeoff, the mishap aircraft's nose landing gear did not retract properly due to hydraulic fluid contaminated by water that froze, preventing full strut extension and resulting in the nose landing gear being canted to the left. The mishap pilot accomplished 2 touch-and-go landings, attempting to recenter the nose wheel. While both attempts failed to center the nose landing gear wheel, the right main landing gear strut and then left main landing gear strut did not fully extend after takeoff due to ice forming inside the strut. After the second touch and go, all valid weight on wheel sensors indicated that the mishap aircraft was on the ground, and the F-35 transitioned to the on-ground flight control laws. However, because the mishap aircraft was actually airborne, it was uncontrollable. Colonel Lewis continues, the entire team involved in this mishap, the pilot, the wingman, supervisor of flying, the operations group leadership, air traffic controllers, and Lockheed Martin engineers who participated in the conference hotel admirably dealt with a challenging situation that had not been seen in the F-35 fleet previously. However, in this situation, the decision to advise the mishap pilot to accomplish touch and goes led to the uncontrolled ejection. When the mishap pilot relayed the health reporting codes after the first touch and go, the conference hotel participants potentially could have referenced the Lockheed Martin maintenance circular from April 2024 that said these weight on wheel sensor issues could lead to aircraft controllability issues. Had the conference hotel participants considered this potential outcome, they likely would have advised a planned full-stop landing or a controlled ejection instead of a second touch and go. The touch and go part of this mishap reminds me of a similar situation aboard an aircraft carrier years ago when an S-3 Viking had a nose landing gear that didn't come down as the pilot lowered the handle during approach. The recommendation from the squadron's commanding officer and the carrier's air boss was that the S-3 should do a touch and go on the flight deck without letting the nose drop to see if that would jar the nose gear loose. But as the S-3 attempted to move, the nose fell to the flight deck, and as the jet skidded off the angle, the COTAC in the right seat initiated his own ejection. The pilot and the other 2 crew members in the back did not eject. Once airborne again, the pilot was able to easily establish flying attitude with the S-3, which kind of had the wing loading of a glider. He wound up coming around again and taking a barricade arrestment, and in this centerline camera view here, you can see the COTAC is missing from the right seat. Finally, the accident board found that the ice that caused the landing gear and weight on wheel sensors to malfunction was because the hydraulic fluid used in the system contained as much as 1/3 water. On that finding, in his conclusion, Colonel Lewis writes, the airmen in the hazmat program did not follow established procedures and technical orders for storing and handling hazardous materials. The cost of all of this to the American taxpayer was $196,500,000. All right, that'll do it for this episode. If you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.